Have you ever realized the breakup that nearly broke you actually was the thing that changed you for the better? Have you ever looked back at the love that hurt you the most and realized it was also the love that taught you the most? Have you ever carried scars from someone only to find that those scars became your map to something better? If you have, then you already know the truth. Some breakups don't just change your relationship status, they change you forever. Have you ever gone through a breakup that you swore would just destroy you, but somewhere along the way you realized it was the very thing that saved you? Have you ever begged for a relationship to survive only to look back months later, maybe even years, and thanked God that it ended? Have you ever found yourself in that strange space after a heartbreak, not as broken as you were in the beginning, but not yet healed either, just somewhere in between, learning to breathe again? That's where the real transformation happens. Because here's the truth: the breakup that changes you forever doesn't only leave scars, it leaves lessons, it leaves clarity, and eventually it leads to peace. But it doesn't happen all at once. First, there's the storm, the screaming, the accusations, the blocking, the gut punch of being replaced. That's the part we sat in together in part one. The chaos that makes you question who you are and whether any of it ever mattered at all. Then comes the silence, the hollow, deafening quiet after the person who once filled your world is just gone. It feels wrong, like something is missing. But at the same time, if you're honest, it feels a little like relief. No more bracing for the next fight, no more waiting to be disappointed again. It's confusing, missing someone and being grateful they're gone in the same breath. But that's the middle space, the in between, where healing doesn't look like wholeness yet. It looks like survival. It looks like sitting in the stillness long enough to notice the first cracks of light coming through on the dark, dark days after those relationships. So welcome back to Chasing Stability. Last week, we sat in the heartbreak, but today we're stepping into the healing, because the love that changes you forever isn't always the one that stays. Sometimes it's the one that leaves. Part two isn't about bitterness. It's about stepping into who you're becoming. It's about realizing that the breakup you thought would destroy you actually just redirects you. That the wrong person didn't ruin you, they revealed you. So let's talk about what happens after the heartbreak, the shift, the lessons, the forgiveness, and the kind of strength you only find once you let go of what was never meant to be yours. So here we go. At first, every breakup like this feels like rejection. That's pretty human. You replay the fights, the screaming, the blocking, the way they replace you so quickly, and the stories you end up telling yourself are simple. I wasn't enough. Not enough to stay for, not enough to fight for, not enough to remember. And those stories stick for a while, right? It stings every time you think about it, because when someone you gave everything to packs up and walks out, your brain translates that into a personal failure. But over time, it doesn't happen overnight. True, but it does happen. You start to see it differently. It wasn't rejection. It was clarity, redirection. It was God closing the door. You didn't have the strength to close yourself. It was life rerouting you away from the love that could have drained you for years and years. It was the kind of ending that looked like punishment in the moment, and I'm sure felt like punishment. I know it always does for me. But it turned out it was really protection in disguise. Rejection says you weren't wanted. Redirection says you were saved. You were easy to leave. Rejection. You weren't willing to settle. Redirection. If you've been through a breakup like this, you know that shift doesn't come with a big bang and fireworks. It comes quietly. It comes the first time you realize you don't have to fight for peace anymore. It comes the first time you laugh again and notice it wasn't forced. It comes the first time you look back and think, thank God I'm not living like that anymore. Because what looked like rejection in the moment was really life making room for healing, making room for growth, making room for a different kind of love you could never have found if you stayed where you were. I believe that when we have a breakup like this, the hardest part to face is that thought that maybe none of it was real, that all of those I love yous, all the moments you thought were safe, were just a lie. And that's what hurts. Because if it wasn't real for them, what does that make it for you? But here's the truth that I've had to wrestle with for quite a while. Just because it ended ugly, just because they moved on quickly, doesn't mean they didn't love you at all. It just means they loved you in a way they were capable of at the time. And sometimes that capacity is heartbreakingly small. They may have loved you, but maybe they loved themselves more. They may have loved you, but only to the limit of what their maturity or emotional availability would allow. They may have loved you, but not in the way you needed or deserved to be loved. And that's the thing. Their version of love doesn't erase yours. It doesn't make the nights you laughed together any less real. It doesn't mean you were delusional. It just means their love wasn't enough to build a life on, no matter how bad you wanted that to be true. And here's where that shift comes in, though. You stop asking, did they love me? And start asking, was their love healthy for me? Or the kind of love I truly even wanted? Because love isn't just about feeling. It's about action, consistency, care, and sacrifice. And sometimes someone can love you and still not choose you in the ways you need to be chosen. Just like how they chose to heal also has nothing to do with how much someone loved you, no matter how hard it is to handle. There's this idea that there's two types of healing. One sitting in silence, replaying the whole relationship, maybe going to therapy to make themselves better. And then there's the other who's moving on as quickly as possible and avoiding the past relationship altogether. I mean, seriously, this idea has now become such a thing that there are like whole sections on TikTok about when a couple breaks up, you can see who was the one who was giving their all versus who wasn't, and whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, the one that glows up is the one who was being hurt the most. But the truth is, everyone heals differently. Some people can't sit with the pain, so they stuff distractions, relationships, new hobbies, anything to avoid being alone with their thoughts. Others take the longer route where they're actually grieving, processing, learning the lesson. But I believe we all go through those phases of healing. Maybe you do all of them. I know I did. The relationship that I just got out of was the one that really changed me forever. And after I found out he moved on, I tried everything I could to distract myself. But then I came into this healing phase when I realized I needed to grow somewhere to not let this happen again. Maybe you flip-flop that order. Maybe you heal first and then you realize that you try to fill a void. Maybe you do none. Maybe you do it all. Maybe you do other things. Either way, none of it is easy, right? No matter which way you're going, you're moving on fast, you're doing this, you're trying to fill a void, you're trying to heal, you're trying to not feel pain. And here's where the growth of trying to move with understanding, because whether their way of healing looks healthy to you or not, it's not your responsibility anymore. And honestly, it's none of your business. Their process doesn't define your worth, just like it doesn't define what the relationship meant. Their pace doesn't invalidate your grief. Let them heal in their way. You keep healing in yours. And if you really are honest with yourselves, we know that their actions after a breakup aren't even about you. And we know this more than likely because there was once upon a time that you have acted like how they're acting to you now. And that's directly related to relationship experience. If this was their first real relationship, first taste of commitment, long term, first taste of vulnerability, first taste of having to just take accountability, or first taste of conflict with someone they love, the ending of that relationship is going to shape them in ways they may not even understand, and they won't until later, just like all of us haven't. I mean, it took a couple years of growth and growing before I could sit and see just how wrong I was about a lot of the stuff that went down in my first real relationship. And if I were a betting woman, I'd say most of us didn't know how to handle losing the first person we loved. We coped however we could. We did things we look back on now and cringe or maybe feel guilty about. So if this was their first relationship, their way of exiting it, whether that was blocking, replacing, or completely blowing things up, says more about their lack of tools in their arsenal than it does about your value. It doesn't excuse the hurt. And of course, it's going to hurt because that shit hits deep, but it does explain the chaos, right? And that perspective is freeing, really, because it reminds you that their actions weren't about proving you were unworthy. They were just the only ways that they knew how to move on and heal. And sometimes that's the only clarity you need to stop carrying the blame, the hurt, the anger. So then after we've moved in the direction of this idea for making space for their healing and forgiving them for hurting you in the process, even though it meant that's what they had to do to heal, we can shift that focus on forgiving ourselves. It always amazed me how much guilt comes after a transformative breakup. Even when you know deep down it takes two people to get to this point, your perspective gets blurry. You start running the highlight reel of the relationship in your head, but instead of seeing both sides, you only see your own mistakes. Maybe I should have been more patient or understanding. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up again. Maybe if I'd been different, they wouldn't have left. Maybe what I feel as a minor mistake was actually that horrible to them. And suddenly it feels like you're carrying the blame for the whole entire thing just decomposing. But every relationship has two people writing the story. You can take ownership of your part. Yes, maybe you stayed longer than you should have. Maybe you ignored red flags. Maybe you lost yourself in the process of trying to love them. Maybe you did something you'd like to take back. But punishing yourself forever doesn't undo any of it. It just keeps you stuck. Forgiveness of yourself isn't saying, I didn't do anything wrong. It's about saying, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. That's all any of us can do. And when you know better, you do better. That's growth. That's healing. We're all going to make mistakes. That's just a fact. But if you don't release yourself from that guilt, you start to believe the lie that you're hard to love. You start to carry shame into new relationships. You start pushing this idea into your subconscious and your nervous system, places you do not want that kind of mindset to reach. It can cause things you would never even believe to be possible. Not to mention how it makes you start to build walls that not even the right person or people could climb. Self-forgiveness is the moment you say and truly believe and understand this line right here. Yes, I messed up. Yes, I stayed too long. Yes, I lost myself, but I learned. And I'm still worthy of love exactly as I am today. So let's just talk about another lie that I feel like almost all of us believe at first if your partner moves on quickly after you. It must be because she's better, prettier, funnier, smarter, easier to love. And sis, when we're already carrying guilt around all that was, this comparison cuts that much deeper. But here's what I've struggled with a lot in my ability to move on. The next girl isn't better. They're just different. Sometimes the new person makes life easier. Maybe they don't call out the red flags. Maybe they don't ask the hard questions yet. Maybe they don't know the full story or haven't seen the cracks in the mask. And that's not a dig at the next person. It's just reality. New love is shiny because it's untested. It's easy because it hasn't had the chance to be stretched, to be tested, to be real. You, on the other hand, saw it all. You saw the parts they hid. You carried the weight of the bills, the arguments, the expectations. You saw what love looked like under pressure. That doesn't make you less. It just makes you seasoned. And sometimes, if it's their first relationship ending, they don't even know how to process it yet. So they grab on to the next person like a life raft. That doesn't mean the connection is deeper. It just means it's filling a space they don't know how to sit alone in. So stop comparing yourself to the person who came after you. They're not living a fairy tale. They're just living the next chapter. You're not in competition with them because love isn't about winning a race. So put the phone down, quit stalking them on social media, because honestly, pro tip, do everything in your power to never learn about the new person. Remove yourself from that story. You don't need to be there anymore. What you're walking toward is not better than her or better than him. What you're walking toward is just better for you. When you stop trying to prove to everyone else that you're doing better and start actually working on just feeling better for you and no one else, damn, that shit is vibrant. It is a clear, radiant boss move. And I'm sure when you just heard me say that, someone you know who has handled a breakup so well that while you watched from the sidelines, you were just in awe and they just popped right into your head. That's the goal. That's the healed place. Because I'm not saying your friend didn't struggle. She just also came back better for her. You see what I'm saying? And that's the difference between surviving a breakup and actually healing from one. Surviving says, I'm going to prove I'm better. Healing says, I'm going to be better for me. I wish so much that I would have learned this lesson so much earlier in life than I did. Because here's something else that I've learned with all of my years of experience in heartbreak. When you stop trying to prove you're better than the new person and instead focus on truly being better for you, something shifts. it's not just about moving on anymore. It's about leveling up, because the work you do now in this in-between space is what decides what kind of person you'll attract next. When you choose yourself, when you start showing up for your own healing, you stop pulling in surface level connections that only feed on chaos. You stop entertaining the almosts, the breadcrumbs, the temporary fixes, and you start attracting people who meet you where you are. Whole people, stable people, people who can pour into you without draining you. Oof. And if you're not finding them in the high numbers when you first start out, that just means you're doing something right, because these kinds of like stable people, they're just not everywhere these days. They're rare. You have to wait. You have to look for them. Like, you have to be vibrant enough to draw them in. But when you do meet someone new that checks all these boxes, they'll continue to help you heal without even realizing it. The right kind of love doesn't come in swinging to fix you. It just shows up consistently. And then suddenly you don't have to beg to be remembered. You're just remembered. You don't have to fight to feel seen. They just notice. You don't have to argue about respect. They just give it freely. And in those little things, you'll start to feel pieces of yourself coming back that you thought were gone for good. You soften up. That hard exterior that you have created for yourself starts to draw back, because they show you exactly what consistency is, and that makes you feel safe. And that's when you realize that love isn't about teaching someone how to care. It's about allowing yourself to receive care without having to ask 1,000 times for it. It's about being reminded in the most natural way that you are lovable, and you start to realize you always were. And it wasn't that hard to love you the way that you wanted to be loved. Those other people just couldn't. But I believe the more you focus on becoming better for yourself right now, the less you'll feel the need to prove anything to anyone else. Because this shift that we're speaking about doesn't just change you, it changes the energy you bring into a room. And that energy, it draws in people who see you clearly, who want to know you deeply, and who will hold your heart with the same curiosity you've been giving away for all these years. Becoming better for you is what brings in better for you. And once you've tasted that, you'll never go back to begging someone to love you the right way. Because why would you? It's kind of wild, because in this day and age, I feel like we get more than just one like kind of breakup that really hurts, but there's always the one that changes it for you forever. It changes you like to your core. This one doesn't just change how you see your ex or yourself. It changes how you see love itself. Because once you've lived through a relationship where you had to beg, explain, repeat, and fight just to feel secure, you start to realize that's not love. It's labor. That's survival mode. And maybe for a while you convince yourself that's what relationships were supposed to be. Hard, dramatic, chaotic. But the more distance you get from those type of relationships, the more you realize that real love doesn't need to be taught over and over again. Real love shows up. That's when you start expecting it from everyone else, because you're giving it to yourself. I just recently had a conversation with one of my friends, and she told me this trick she does when things don't work out for her with like a guy. And it's so simple and like nothing crazy, but she tells herself that my husband wouldn't do blank. This makes it pretty easy to move on when you've realized there's nothing there for your future. Cheated on, your husband would never do that. Made you feel less than, your husband would never do that. Made you feel like too much, your husband would never do that either. I loved it so much because I think it makes it easier to separate like the big emotions when you're going through like the breakup and the pain, and allowing yourself to just realize you know what you want and this is not it. So why are you sitting here accepting it? I'm not saying that letting go isn't going to be hard and that you're never going to think about them, because more than likely, yeah, you will, especially if it is this big love that we're talking about today. This is the love. It's the one that made everything change. You realize everything in these relationships, kind of like how grand gestures or Instagram worthy moments aren't what growing a family or a stable relationship is about. Consistency, attention, awareness. That's the stuff that matters. And having these big loves allows you to open the door, take only what you want with you, and define what love means to you. You get to set the bar higher, or at least I hope you set it higher. You get to grow up, move on, and expect more and nothing less. At this point in my life, love means safety. It means presence. It means joy, accountability. And if I don't see those things, it's not called love to me anymore. And that's different for everyone. And you can't control how someone else sees love or gives love, but you can control how you receive it. You control if it's good enough for you to stay. You get to control what you call love. And the moment you start holding your standards, you realize that what once broke you actually had prepared you for something better, healthier, long lasting. So maybe the breakup that changed you forever wasn't about losing love. Maybe it was about learning what love really is to you and what you'll never accept again. So big shocker, right? Your biggest love story relationship ended in a breakup that hurt. Yeah, it took pieces of you weren't sure you'd ever get back, but it also gave you something priceless. Perspective, a sharper filter, a stronger backbone, a deeper sense of self and what you actually want/deserve. And if you're the next Taylor Swift, it probably gave you a couple of songs. But here's what I don't want you to miss. This didn't ruin you. He didn't ruin you, or she didn't ruin you. It probably felt like that at the beginning, like the world was ending, but now you're starting to see it all in a completely different light. Like, how much do you just want to hug your younger self who you see begging for bare minimum because she didn't love herself enough to just walk away? Ugh. And how nice does it feel to not be worried about possibly starting another fight because you didn't do something or you said something wrong or whatever. And that alone is so much growth. Acknowledge that. Celebrate that. You're stepping into this freedom that's going to actually attract the kind of love you've always wanted and hoped for, because now you actually know how to receive it and give it. You needed this one. You needed this big breakup right here to get there. So don't wish it away or hide from it, and stop with the comparisons. It's just going to pull you back to that ego that isn't ready for true love. You're not trying to win the breakup. You're just trying to be a better you for you every single day, even if it's just 1%. So I leave you with this. Stop asking, why wasn't I good enough for them? And start saying, thank God they weren't enough for me. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening today. Here's to always finding the growth in the hard situations that would be easy to fall victim under. The love that changes your life is one that will always be with you. You just have to remember you get to control how much of it actually gets to be with you. Thank you again for spending this time with me. This is Chasing Stability, and I'll meet you in the in-between next Tuesday.